Hey everyone, I'm Purge and welcome to another anime update. Now, before I get into what I've been watching, what I've completed, as usual, I'll go over something else. And this time, I thought I would go over this feature right here of Anilist called Activity History. Now, I mentioned this feature in my very first um, my very first anime update video, but I didn't really go into it that much. So I thought I'd go into it a bit more in depth now because it's one of the more interesting features on a list, and I actually quite like it. So it's called Activity History. Now, each one of these dots represent one day. So as you can see here, this one's for the 31st of December, 1st of January, 2nd of January, etc. All of these dots represent a day. Now, if they are coloured, like so, it means you have one activity for that day, on that day, at least one activity. So as you can see here, the amount of activities here, 6, 7, 1, 3, and this little brightly colored one is for 39 activities, 11, 11. Now, as you can see here, when you get at least one activity, it'll actually fill the box with a color, and when you get to a certain threshold of activities, it'll actually change the color to be sort of more intense, like as you can see this one and this one. Now, obviously, these here means no activity. And I have to be honest, it's a feature that people really like because it kind of encourages you to keep on creating activities. And when I mean activities, I simply mean um, an activity on your activity feed here. So this is an activity, that's an activity, that's an activity. If I scroll down, the text one's an activity. As long as you've got at least one activity on that day, it'll fill one of the squares here. But the coloring, interesting enough, the coloring is dynamic. So if, let's say for instance, if you were just, doing one activity a day, right? As soon as you started doing two activities, it would change the color, or like five activities, it would change the color. The color that you get with activities is based on the highest amount of activities on a day you still have showing. So for me, the highest amount is 39 activities. That was a day I put loads of anime on plan to watch because I had loads of those recommendations. So that's why it's got 39 activities on that day because I put loads of anime on planning. So because that is showing, even though I've got three activities here, it's still that color, that kind of grey color. Even though I've got seven activities here, six, four, it's still that color because it uses the highest activity count still showing as a precedent for all the other colors. So, for example, if this wasn't here, it would actually change color with a less amount of activity, a smaller amount of activities. But because that is here, it uses that as a precedent for the subsequent activities and then colors it accordingly. Now, when this activity here goes off of the activity history, because it will eventually just get pushed back and pushed back and pushed back, and then off to the activity history right here, the coloring will change because it won't use 39 as the precedent. It'll start using 11, and then because it's a smaller number, it'll start changing the color of the activities with smaller amounts of activities. So yeah, I hope that made sense. Um, I think it's a pretty cool, sort of interesting feature that even though it's kind of like arbitrary, it doesn't really mean anything in the grand scheme of things. It does. People do like it, and it does make people actually use the make people want to create activities on Anilist. It's a pretty nice thing. Activity history. I actually like it, and I must confess, I have found myself wanting to keep up with activities on Anilist, wanting to keep on using Anilist, just so I can fill the next activity square. That may sound a bit weird, but yeah, I have done it. I will admit it. But no, it's a pretty cool activity, and I do like. It's kind of satisfying seeing it all filled activities. cool colours. Anyway, that was activity history. Now, the main event. Let's get on with my actual anime list right here, and let's see what I've actually finished since the last update. We go to last updated. Right. So the first thing is Gant Zero. Now, just before I actually go into this, last update I did mention that any OVAs or movies associated with anime I've been watching or have watched are kind of exempt from going on to up next. I'll just watch them. I can just watch them because they're linked to an anime I've already watched anyway. I didn't mention it, but I've decided to use that rule exemption for standalone OVAs and movies as well. So as you can see, like Gant Zero was never on the up next list. Neither was like Under Giant Insects was never on it because these are kind of like standalone movies. Now, Gantz is actually a part of a franchise, technically the Gantz franchise, because it's got like anime, it's got a manga. However, it's considered like a standalone film in terms of story because you don't actually have to watch or read any of Gantz to watch the movie. It's kind of its own thing. So I just watched it. And I'm glad I did because Gantz is a movie that's completely CGI, and the CGI, I must admit, is really good. The CGI is really well done. So the story is um, a guy seemingly gets killed and then wakes up in a room with with other people and a black orb in the room, and he has no idea what's going on. And then he's tasked with fighting monsters, essentially. Now, it might sound a little weird, but I don't want to go too much into the story for spoilers, but that's essentially what it is. And I have to be honest, it's really quite enjoyable, and it is actually good. The characters, okay, the characters are not great, but they get the job done. They're kind of investable. The story, there's not much of a story outside of the kind of main sort of narrative drive, but it's just quite enjoyable. The battles look really good, the monsters look really good, the CGI is really good. In fact, I was debating whether to give it an 8, and I didn't because it has problems. But I could have easily given an 8 just out of pure enjoyment. I give it a 7, but I would recommend Gant Zero. It's a good movie. It's a good time. It's enjoyable. Then, on the other hand, I watched the Island of Giant Insects movie. It is another standalone movie. Now, okay, technically that's not true because a year before this movie came out, there was an OVA of the same name, which I was going to watch, but decided not to because I found out that the OVA is just a very condensed version of this movie that came out a year later. So I just oh, if I could speak, just watched this movie. Now I'm laughing because this movie, The Island of Giant Insects, is universally disliked by everybody who watches it, and I must admit it is bad, but it's not that bad in my opinion, and it's pretty fun. So in it, the story goes: this group of people um, crash onto a seemingly deserted island, and on that island are quite literally giant insects that kill people, and they have to try and survive. That's literally the story. Now, I watched it in dub, and I'm kind of glad I did because the English dub, is wild and kind of ridiculous. There's a ton of bad language. There's a ton of really ridiculously um, silly, over the top lines I can't even repeat on the video, but trust me, the dub is wild. So if you decide to watch it, watch it in dub because it's kind of ridiculous. Um, the animation is okay. The characters are just kind of almost universally bad. They're not very good. Um, the main character does everything for the group. Like, there's no. It feels like none of the other characters, apart from the main character, has like any agency in the story, because the main character basically thinks of everything and does everything kind of for them. Um, but it's kind of gory. There's etchy in it, and yes, it is bad. I give it like a 4 out of 10. It is bad. They're like the story's kind of rubbish. The characters are almost universally really bad too. But I gotta be honest, it is fun, and if you keep like a kind of open mind and just take it as like a bit of a popcorn flick, it is a fun time. It's not even that long. I think it's like um hour and 15. But it is fun. I would, even though I give it a 4, I would recommend the Another Giant Insects movie just for a laugh. I might even call it "It's So Bad, It's Good." But yeah, bad but fun. And that was Another Giant Insects. This Boku to Nurse no Kenshu Nishi the animation is a very cultural anime, and we all know what that means. Um, I will say that it's very generic, extremely vanilla, and very censored. And for all of those reasons, I gave it a 5. It's okay. So there we go. Moving on. I did finally finish Mob Psycho 100, the first season, and I have to be honest, very, it's very good. It's very good. The animation is good, um, but I never quite got on with the art style. The art style is kind of odd, but it is really good. In it, um, this character here, a middle school kid called Mob, that's his nickname. Um, he has psychic powers. He's known as an Esper, and he uses psychic powers initially to help his boss, I guess you could call him, destroy evil spirits. Now his boss is basically a con artist with no powers himself, and he just kind of uses Mob to um, do the jobs that he can't do himself. Now, for about the first 6 episodes, I would say for me there wasn't really any story focus or much story focus. But then after that, there did get to be a good amount of like story focus in what was going on, and it made it about halfway through. The story got much better and much more clear in what they were going for with the narrative, and I ended up like sort of really liking it. It's very good. Again, there's superpowers which are like, really flashy and interesting. There's quite a lot of battles which again are good. Again, the animation is really good. It's just that the art style is a little bit weird, and I don't know if it's going to grow on me or not in subsequent seasons. But no, it is really good. The characters are interesting. The story actually did end up being really interesting as well, and overall, it's a pretty fun watch. It is kind of wacky as well, and it's kind of got this kind of random comedy streak going through it, a little bit like Gintama, but a little bit more um in keeping with the actual situation and characters rather than it being totally random like Gintama is. But yeah, Mob Psycho is really good, and I would definitely recommend it. I give it an 8. Then I watched Mob Psycho Mini, which is just a series of 6 special episodes that are like 6 minutes long, and they tell very short stories of what what some of the characters were doing when they weren't featured in the actual show, and it's all done in the art style of like an 8-bit video game, which is actually really interesting. I gave it a 6. It was fine because, simply put, there's not really much to it. If you wanted to, you could skip it entirely. But I thought it was pretty unique because of what they did with the animation, and it was kind of fun. So yeah, I mean, if you kind of want something a little bit unique, and you just want more Mob Psycho, I'd watch it. But you could easily, if you don't have time to watch it, you could easily skip it, no problem. But then again, it's not much of a time investment anyway, because again, it's 6 episodes and it's like 6 minutes long, so you could watch it. Then I watched Mob Psycho 100, Reagan the Miraculous Unknown Psychic OVA, which is actually a summary slash recap of the first season. Now, usually I don't watch summaries or recaps simply because there's no point in obviously watching it, because why would I watch a season recap if I've only just watched the actual season? So normally I don't watch like summaries or recaps, but in this case I made an exception because of the way it's done in context. The recap is done in the context of a retelling of events by Reagan, and consequently there is like a bit of a quirkiness to it, flashbacks, and you do get a bit more of the story and characters that weren't actually in um, the show. So in other words, you do get like juicy new stuff. So I watched it again. It's an hour long, so not much for time investment, and I gave it a 7. It is good. I would definitely recommend, even if you don't watch like Mob Psycho Mini, I would definitely recommend watching the OVA, this OVA, Reagan the Miraculous Unknown Psychic, after Mob Psycho 100, for a bit of a fun summary, but also some new story stuff. So that was everything I completed since last update. Now we'll go to everything I've been watching, and I say everything I've been watching and laugh about it because at the moment it's just Yu-Gi-Oh! Now, I have watched since last update 10 episodes of Yu-Gi-Oh!, which is actually pretty good going for me recently, because recently before this, I don't think I watched like none in that week. But this time, I watched 10 episodes since the last update. Um, and I have to be honest, I'm really, really glad I've got out of that weird kind of like, let's call it Noah arc. Because again, as I said before, all of it was spoilers. I kind of misspoke before saying, "Oh, Enter the Shadow Realm is the arc," and that's what it's that was what the story arc was. That was all spoilers, but no, Enter the Shadow Realm is technically the quote unquote third season of Yu-Gi-Oh, and the arc that's all filler only comprises the first half of the season. So even though it's technically still Enter the Shadow Realm, it's not the filler arc anymore. It's not the no arc anymore. So now we've gone back on track with the proper Battle City arc, which is obviously all canon. So I'm really liking Yu-Gi-Oh again. It's really good, and it's basically um the reason I watched 10 episodes of it is because I got right back into it. Because again, now the story is really interesting again, and it's all relevant. So that's everything I've got on watching for this update. And of course, there won't be. I won't bother going into any up next editions because there aren't any, because the up next list, as you can see right here, is the exactly same one I had from last update. So there's no need to talk about that. So there you go, folks. I hope you like the video, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.